Who is it?
Hooyo ma joogtaa?
Hooyo Mataalo. She went shopping.
Hooyo markay timaado haba xabiibaa kuu timid ku dheh.
Okay, habo.
Yo, wagwan, assalamu alaikum, damantini kusodawada, and welcome to Hooyo Mataalo podcast. I'm Lee, short for Liban.
I'm Sam, short for Samatar.
And yeah, we're back for another episode.
Yes, back for another episode.
A special episode.
Yes. Well, every episode is a special
Of course,
episode,
of course.
Yeah, definitely. So today we've got two guests rather than one. I think this is the first time we've actually had two guests coming on rather than one. And we've got a former Oxford University student, sorry, that done an episode for us previously, going by the name of Ikra. And today we also got Adam joining us, current student at Oxford University. So we're going to hopefully have them introduce themselves.
So for those watching on YouTube, obviously you can only see three of us here. Ikra is behind the mic, so behind the camera, I mean. So yeah.
So we'll have that. So we're going to introduce ourselves. So Ikra, you want to do the...
Yeah, so it's good to be back. I like to keep myself anonymous.
Yeah.
So I'll be staying behind the camera today. But it's good to be back on here. And I'm actually here with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who is also Somali and a very impressive member of our community. His name is Adam. We actually went to university together. But he sort of started in Brixton. He worked really hard and did very well and got into a really good private school called Eton that is produced a lot of former prime ministers.
20 to be
to be exact. Now that we're being exact.
Your homework on that.
Yeah. And from there, he was able to do some really incredible things, and he went on to then study at Oxford, which is where we were lucky enough to meet. And then now as a student in Oxford, he's also done some really cool things. And he is a former president of the Oxford Union, which is a private debating chamber that he can talk about a little bit more. So that is my very good friend, Adam. And I think to start with, we can just start with maybe Adam talking about himself a bit, about what he's doing now and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for having me. It's been great to meet you both and to see you again, Ikra. So currently I study history and politics at Oxford. I'm in my second year, really enjoying it. Like Ikra said, I live in South London, grew up in the Netherlands but moved to South London when I was about 5-6 years old. Like many Somali people in London, I suppose, currently between there, Sweden and Finland.
and Denmark.
And Denmark, yeah.
Can't forget that.
Denmark, and it's great to be here today with you guys. So thank you so much for having me.
No, it's actually... We got plugged in by Ikra, literally. We had like a list of potential guests we had, and we actually had your name on there. Because for the viewers, anyways, that are able to see you anyways, is... the way I first came across you was literally on an ITV interview, and I was like, "Masha, we got a kid going to like Eton." Literally, this is it's such a big thing because I think I've come across Eton, the actual name Eton beforehand, like a couple of years before that, and I was like, okay, forget about that. That's for particular people with a particular background or depending on the income and whatnot. So I was like, the only person from like London that got a scholarship going there kind of thing, that's like a huge thing. And at the same time, you've been celebrated too at the ISA award too, and rightfully so, because getting into those kind of places is a big thing. So no, we're really glad to have you on today. So I really appreciate it. I know you're a bit incognito, especially. So like I said, no, I really appreciate that, by the way.
No, not at all. I like to keep myself to myself, but it's great everything you've been doing with the podcast and the YouTube as well. So
Would you could you go into like the process of applying for this and winning a scholarship?
Yeah, no, of course. So the age that people apply is when they're about 15, 16 years old. The deadline's normally around December of year 11, as soon as you start year 11, and it's a sixth form scholarship, which is what I got and was really lucky enough to get. It's an academic one, and you, in the first instance, you apply with a personal statement, and a reference from your head teacher at your school, as well as a list of the subjects that you'd want to study and your predicted GCSE grades as well. The school Eton then reviews all of the initial applications and then chooses a list of about maybe 30 people to invite to come to Eton for the interviews themselves and for assessments. I was lucky enough to be shortlisted, then was invited to spend a few days away from my secondary school, then Arkworth Academy, and go to Eton. I was really happy about that at the time because it meant, at the very least, even if I don't get in, I get a week off of school. And that's kind of like how it started. There were 2 tests that I had to do. One was a sort of like writing assessment, just basically asking me to like take a sort of philosophical question. Like the question I think was something along the lines of is Amazon and like consumerist culture something that's good for like the future and good for us generally as the human population? Is that something that's a good thing? You had to like take an argument and like run with it and try and support it. And then the other test was a sort of like IQ test, which funny story about that. I got sort of like really, really nervous about the IQ test because I was like, never done one of these before, didn't have like any clue what was going on. It's like one of those like full of questions, like if this flag moves anti-clockwise and then 180 degrees this way, which one of these 4 picture flags does it then become? And that really confused me. So I sort of like spent a long time thinking hard about each question, and I thought that test itself was an hour long in total. Turns out it was half an hour long, and there were like 60 questions. I was sat like right at the back. I thought each question was like a minute per question. That sounds reasonable. I was spending a minute on each question. End up on like question 35. It's like 27, 28 minutes in. I think I'm doing really well. And then the guy at the front shouts, 2 minutes left. And then I'm like, well, bit of a sticky one. What do I do now? So then I just like B, D, A, blah, 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 like just put random like letters in. And as I'm handing my paper over, I realized that the like last 5-10 questions, just like it changes from like letters and like multiple choice letters to like how many times does this flag like rotate. And I thought to myself, they're gonna think I'm an absolute idiot because I put a D in a box that's asking you how many times and they're expecting like 3 or 4 or whatever. So there's no way that I'm getting in. So then I just became really, really relaxed for the days coming ahead where I had all the interviews. And because I was so like, I'm definitely not getting in, I think that kind of attitude like helped me to just be my best self in the interviews, and to make the most of it. So I had interviews with the head teacher and all of the heads of department of the subjects that I applied to study, and then subsequently got an offer and then went.
Was it like was a scholarship something you had an eye on like prior, or was it something like, you know, like your teachers pushed you towards?
That's a really interesting question. The way that I found out about Eton at first was through a CBBC like documentary. I was like playing football with my friends, came home like 5:30 whatever, and it was after school, obviously, and CBBC was just on, and it was part of this like series that CBBC were doing at the time, and the title of this particular program was The World's Most Famous School. And it was just a documentary about 3 or 4 boys who went to Eton on full scholarships from the start, because it starts from year 9 and it ends in year 13. But very few people join at the start of year 12. And I saw this like documentary thing and I was like, this school looks awesome. And I was then in year 9. So then I like Googled it, saw that I'd like, if I was going to apply, I would have needed to like, in theory, be one of the boys in the documentary and have like applied like a whole year ago, because they were like my age exactly, which I think is part of the reason why I found it so like relatable. It was too late for me to apply, so I just forgot about it entirely, put it to the back of my mind, didn't think about it again until my year 10, the summer holidays, just before I went into year 11, so my year 10 summer holidays, and I was thinking about where I was going to go for sixth form, like after year 11 and post GCSEs. And it was on like results day that I saw, because I like basically got really into like reading newspapers, and like picking up the Evening Standard and stuff like that from the tube station that I'd always go past on my way back home. from school, and it was like results day. I must have been playing football or something again in August, and pick up one of these papers, and I see like this headline that comes out now. I've realised every single A-level results day, where they talk about where people are going to university and stuff like that, and the headline being like 10 private schools sending more people to Oxbridge than like 10,000 schools across the country combined, or something along those lines. And I saw one of the schools was like Eton, that sends like a lot of people to Oxbridge, and that's always been like a bit of a dream kind of thing, like going to Oxford or Cambridge. And yeah, and then I was like, well, let me look into Eton again, see if they do anything for sixth form. Saw that they did, and then I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And I had one particular teacher, an English teacher, who like supported me a lot through it. Who was really nice guy, and helped me a lot with like drafting my personal statement when I applied initially. But yeah, that's how
Always an English teacher.
There's always an English
That's
teacher.
going the extra mile. So like, what was sort of some of the things like you found were particularly different from the school you went to? So like, what kind of school, because you obviously went to a state school before in South London, what are the main differences that you found when you first started Eton that like surprised you?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that I struggled with the most at the start was the boarding aspect of it, and the fact that I had to like live away from home, and I wasn't with like my home comforts, my like game console, my younger brothers who I'd annoy, or my older sister who I'd also probably annoy, and like family time and like spending time with family, and family food and everything else, was just like an entirely different environment, living with people that I didn't really know, and it was like sort of a bit alien, and I think that's what I sort of struggled with the most. But something that I really appreciated that made things easier was the fact that the particular house that I was in was just such a really like welcoming environment, and like the boys that were in my year, I was the 11th boy to be in that year. There were like 10 of them before, but they'd all known each other for 3 years before. And I think like when you live with a group of people for like 3 years, you get to know them really well, right?
Yeah.
And you get to pick up on people's mannerisms, and they'd all like got to know each other so much. But also there does reach a point where you might start to become like sick and tired of like the sameness of everything. So I think they were all really keen to get to know somebody new and have somebody new sort of join the mix. So then I sort of, as a result of that, got to know them really well, got to know people in other houses, got involved in societies at Eton as well, and like was really lucky enough to end up being the head of the political society there, where we managed to get some really interesting speakers to come as well, from politicians to former UK prime ministers to like academics and really sort of people at the forefront of politics in the UK and like across the world as well, which is
Was it like
an opportunity.
who is Adam basically at a state school? Was you that type of person that was always in the library kind of thing, or was you more like did you get any support from your family in terms of, they must have known, of course, you was great at school, getting these great grades, like did you have like a support bubble kind of thing?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like from a young age, like growing up, it was always the case that like I feel like there's a bit of a thing in like lots of Somali communities as well, especially in the UK. Like even if your mum and dad don't have very much, they'll spend what little that they do have on sending their kids to tuition, and you end up spending weekends upon weekends going from Duxie to tuition, and everything else. And that's exactly what my parents tried to do for me, which meant that I got really interested in school and like in reading and stuff like that. I enjoyed like sports, like a lot of what I was talking about before. A lot of important things in my life have happened after coming back from playing football with my friends, and kind of still do as well, I suppose. But and I think I enjoyed school. Was probably a bit of a chatterbox growing up, I think. Like when I was younger, earlier on, I was when I was at home, I was with my cousin and her son, and she was asking my mum what we were all like when we were growing up. And my mum was like talking about how I was the one who literally like she could leave me in like the like daycare place or whatever, like in nursery, and I'd be fine. I wouldn't cry. I'd literally make friends with anyone and everyone, and I'd just be like an absolute chatterbox. And as we were just like going down the street, sometimes just chat to random strangers. She said I was like one of her kids, because she's got 4 kids. I like started speaking the earliest, basically. and I don't think I've ever stopped since then.
I
But
think
yeah.
that's one thing Adam won't give himself enough credit for, but it's probably his biggest sort of like asset or thing that I noticed as well at uni is that put him in a room with anyone and everyone loves Adam because
gonna
he's
say,
genuinely
you
he's
know how
a
to
nice
adapt to your environment. Literally, you can be thrown in any place that is right, and then bang, you know, like to adapt yourself in a certain way, kind of thing. Do you know
in a
what I
way
mean?
that's
Like,
very genuine.
yeah,
and not,
genuine. It's not
yeah,
forced kind of thing.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
And in a way that you enjoy the company of
Exactly.
everyone you
Yeah.
meet, which I think is one of the things that makes you so personable. And like, do you think that was what made Eton sort of a bit easier? Maybe it wasn't easier for you as opposed to maybe like, you know, the experiences some of the other scholarship children. And also, like, do you think there are any like big misconceptions about going to somewhere like Eton, like whether they're positive or negative, that you'd be like, this was different to what I thought?
Yeah. So I'll take the first part of that first. It's sort of, sorry, remind me.
Do you think that you maybe found Eton a bit
Yeah.
easier because you were so good at being able to adapt?
I think part of it was that because if I like kind of went in there with the mindset of everything that I do and everything that I enjoy doing is the only thing that I can possibly enjoy, and like went in with a sort of more closed-minded attitude, then that just wouldn't have helped me. And I think it's like, because I don't know, for quite a long time now, I've always had the attitude of like, obviously I like myself, and like if you don't like yourself, there's probably a problem there. But
That's a good mindset.
no, not just
That's a good mindset to have.
That was a good mindset. But it's the fact that like I know about myself, like I know about my life, I know what I've done, and I know what I hope to do maybe, but I don't know the answers to those questions for other people, and I find that so much more interesting rather than like, I don't know, it's a bit of a, I haven't done something like this in maybe forever, stroke a very long time, but I think that's because I much prefer being on the other side, like asking the questions, getting to know someone, rather
being on
than
the other receiving end. Definitely,
because I know about myself, but then and I just find it much more interesting to like get to know about other people, because it's the kind of like you never know attitude. You never know the person you might meet like through a certain conversation, or connections that could be made between like, you know, this person and they know this person, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like worlds colliding, and then it's just like really interesting, and you learn so much through that as well. And I think that's something that's really important for personal development and personal growth as well. And then in terms of the second part of your question of like misconceptions, good or bad, like of Eton, something that I've always found really interesting is, so when I like started at uni, like people didn't really know like at first that I'd like gone to Eton, like within like my college setting, like a lot of people who I'd like in my then year group and stuff, and as the weeks went on, it wasn't something that was like important. It's not like you start a conversation with someone, you walk up to them and you're like, I'm Adam, I went to Eton, it's great to meet you. It's not like a kind of conversation starter. Exactly. But as time goes on, people sort of find out, because you're like,
it just comes up.
It just comes up, exactly. Like you bump into somebody on the high street or whatever at uni, and then you're with a friend, and then they ask you how you know each other, and they're like, from school, and they're like, oh, but I thought you live in South London, and this person doesn't look like they live in South London. And then you then explain, and then it's like the amount of times that I got the sort of, oh, I never expected that, or like it's like a look of surprise or whatever else. And I think often, like if knowing that somebody went to Eton is like the first thing that you find out, I've realized that people often have one of two like the two most interesting reactions are like, either they like love you immediately as a result of it, and they sort of immediately sort of like you kind of see the dollar signs in their eyes, or like they kind of just think, oh, this guy's going this guy's going places, or like whatever else, and they like the idea of you rather than you.
Definitely.
But then I think the second thing is like a circumstance in which they just immediately don't like anything that you stand for. They hate the idea of you without knowing you, and it just creates a bit of a barrier in some ways. It's not quite misconceptions, but I think like it kind of answers the question, because it can act like it's one of the most amazing things that anyone can have, like education, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a commodity that like you can't, it's something that you can't like, I mean, you can kind of put a price on it, but
Yeah.
like you can't quite put a price.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
invaluable. And I think like there are misconceptions and stuff, but I much prefer people to get to know me for me rather than the things that I've done. Obviously, like that makes up a part of me, but there's somebody behind it. If you,
I think, there's definitely, on the receiving end, there's
Yeah.
definitely often a bit of a negative perception in terms of, because people project what they think the
They think,
average
exactly.
Eton person
Yeah.
is, which is wealthy and white and from a very, like a specific background.
Yeah.
And I almost think part of Adam's redeemingness for that is people knew you were on scholarship.
yeah,
So I think that also impacts the way that like people see you, because then they're a lot more like impressed by it. But it's definitely interesting to sort of hear it from their perspective, like from someone from Eton's perspective, in terms of how people perceive them differently, I guess, because of it.
yeah, something.
Do pressures come with that? Like the fact that people know that you're there, like through a scholarship. Like, do they expect for you to, like, be the, like the smartest person there or something like that?
Something that was okay. So it's a bit specific and a bit personal, but I don't mind sharing it. Like in at Eton, there's this thing called like they're called like trials, but they're basically exams that you take at the end of each term, but it's only at the end of the first term and at the end of the third term. So end of year and end of first term exams. And everybody in each subject is it's a bit brutal, but it's less brutal than how it used to be way back when. Everybody, you get given a piece of paper, and the mark that you got in the paper, and the subject and stuff, and you also know exactly where you were in everybody who did the paper. So they'll tell you, like, if 56 people sat the paper, it will tell you were 23rd out of 56 or whatever, and they put a box plot as well, like, on there just to show you where the average was and everything. And in terms of like expectations, there weren't like formal expectations of like you have to be top of the year group or whatever else or this, that and the other. But like any school that produces like great results, there's just this culture of everybody striving to like top the year in a particular subject or whatever else, or get a trials prize for a particular subject. And in the same like exam series, so the subjects I did were English, literature, Spanish, history, and and politics as well. And I love Spanish. It was one of the subjects I enjoyed the most. Unfortunately, it was my worst subject, at least relative to other people in the year, when I got given that piece of paper and it told me 56 out of 56. And it was the first piece of paper that I got, and I got a bit confused because I was like, does this mean that I got 56 marks out of 56? Yeah. But it became clear that wasn't the marks. It was the position that I came in the year. But luckily, in that same like exam series, like on that same piece of paper, it had like 1 out of 124 or something along those lines in politics, because I like came top of the year in politics, and I was really happy about that. So you're good at some things and you're not good at other things, and things start to balance out. Obviously I didn't carry on with Spanish to year 13, but that's besides the point, because I really enjoyed politics and history and English. But there are expectations, but I feel like part of it is how much you put onto yourself, because it's different, right? I feel like it's a different kind of expectation when you know that there is this sort of faceless, anonymous like donor who you'll probably never meet because of confidentiality or whatever else, who's paying for your school fees, versus your parents who you go home to
every day
at holidays.
to,
Exactly.
You're held accountable for whatever you've done, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Which is different. But at the same time, what I was gonna say to you is because you got to Eton at year 12, right? It was year 12 that you got there. Did you not feel like you came from a state school that you're playing a bit of a catch up, because they know the system and everything. They've already got this great education already before you. Not saying, of course, that the school that you was at didn't give you a great education there, and that you didn't achieve those grades. But at the same time, did you feel like that there was still a level there that you still had to reach before you got there.
Because it's not just the education is it with Eton, like because it is boarding as well. There are
There's
a lot of different
other
rules.
aspects to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different extracurriculars, and I know like
Yeah.
with schools like that, you know, they really encourage loads of different types of sports and instruments, and people are incredibly talented there outside of just academics, which is one thing that shocked me.
Like for example, something like, I don't know if they've done that by the way, but something like rowing, for example.
Yeah.
Like a rowing team or whatever club kind of thing. This is not something that we've got access to, especially someone like yourself that's from an inner city school. That these are not on the exactly.
Yeah.
The only thing, the closest thing maybe that you get to is maybe rugby kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah,
you're great at rugby.
So it's something like rugby. That's
your
probably
best sport.
So it's probably like rugby. That's what I say. So these, because I remember you mentioned in the ITV
fencing,
interview,
innit? Like I'm
think
sure I
it's
heard
like
fencing.
or something like that.
Fencing and
So-
something else, but I can't.
Debating to fencing.
I think they might have even in our school. I think they literally gave us like a little taster. They brought the equipment, and
For
then we've done it.
fencing?
Yeah, literally. And then I think it was like a one-off or something like. And then after we never seen it again, kind of thing. So it's
probably a good thing.
It must have been different at Eton. So you had to literally get these kind of what was it like? Did you have access to things that you never had access to?
Yeah, like 100%. So on the rowing front, in all honesty, I've never seen the appeal of rowing. It's early mornings, it's cold, you could drown. It's not really for me, but there was this whole thing that got created, like I think a few years maybe before I joined, called the Queen's 8, which is I think they used it for like Olympic rowing and like Olympic competitions as well, way back when. And it's like one of the most state of the art like rowing. It's called an 8, EYOT, but it's basically like a mini island, and it's got like just a body of water around it, and then like a long straight, I think, that people can just row down. So it's really good for competition. So like Olympic rowers and stuff will come and use it. There's a guy who like won numerous like gold medals in rowing and like competitions and stuff. He went to Eton as well. He has like a big portrait of him there, and yeah, it was stuff like that I just found mind blowing. Like it didn't necessarily make me want to do all of it, like I've just said, but that I managed to sort of throw myself into debating a bit more, which I'd done before. There were like weird school games, like the field game and the wall game, that like aren't played anywhere else, like at all. And it's in Eton. Those two games are like Eton specific things. And like only people who went to Eton know the rules for like those particular games. Field games kind of a bit of a cross between rugby and football, where you have like rucks, like with rugby, where the sort of two teams that link together, but the only people who can like touch the ball with their hands are the two longs, which are like the goalkeepers in a way, and you're not allowed to like run in front of certain players, and it's sort of like quite complicated. I don't think I entirely understood the rules for that, but it involves a lot of running, literally like running up and down and up and down, and you have to switch at the right moment and stuff. So that was like always quite interesting. But it's like lots of stuff like that I just found quite eye-opening, and it was kind of like a whole different world and like a whole different space that I don't know, you were just like spoilt for choice. There was fencing as well. Yeah.
Did you feel like you got to the place where because from what I'm taking so far, right, is that you're a really a curious person, because something like you picked up a newspaper and you just read something and then you picked something out kind of thing, and like your mom knowing that if she put you in any room, for example, that you're able to adapt. So it's just you being really curious about finding out about different people. That going to somewhere like Eton, for example, it wasn't something that someone would be like, oh, he's not really gonna adapt to her, but it's just you being really curious at the same time. So you're there for terms, right? I'm assuming, and there must be a period where you get to go home, right?
Yeah.
So what was it like going back home after your first term, for example? You're going back to Brixton, and then you're seeing probably the high street and everything else. Like, what was it like? You're going from one world to another world, kind of thing.
Something that I'll never forget. Often, so like the first time I went back, so the way in which it works is that terms would be like, I think something like maybe 12 weeks long. And you'd have like half-time break, like 6 weeks in, and every 3 weeks you'd get to go home for like this thing called short leave, which is just for the like an extended weekend. So like Friday through to like Sunday night or Monday morning or something. And the first time like going back after 3 weeks there, I just like jumped on the train and went back to London because it was only an hour on the train and it was like quite convenient. And I remember, and I know like this, I got this feeling every single time I would like get the train back from Eton. The train would drop me off at Vauxhall, and then at Vauxhall I'd get on the tube to Brixton. And as I'm like coming up the escalator and I just see like the sort of massive mural and I just see like just the demographics of the people, like, and it's quite a long escalator. I don't know if you guys have been to Brixton Station before.
Yeah,
there's a lot of time to think if you're not walking up the escalator. And I would just like feel the cold air just like rushing down, see like so many more like black people with like diverse backgrounds, hear the guy playing steel pans at the top, smell the incense that the guy was like selling literally a few stores down on the main street as well, next door to the Iceland, and like it just felt like home, but it didn't feel like being at Eton and then coming here was like a betrayal. It was like a kind of expanding my horizons and being happy that I was able to sort of live in both spaces at the same time, but still be myself and not lose my sense of self. Exactly.
What was the reaction like from the Somali community when you got into Eton? Because you know, I must not be the only person that's literally caught you on ITV. Like, there must be loads of people that said.
It's actually how I met Adam was through reading an article when he won that International Somali Award. And it was years later when someone mentioned his name. I was like, I think I have a recollection. I think I remember.
You saw him what on the ISO award? Did you say it?
So like when I was younger, had read an article about when he'd gotten the scholarship to Eton. Yeah. And years later at university was told that a Somali boy was joining the college where I lived, basically. So someone had mentioned his name, and I was like, I recognise this name. This was like 1 a.m. in my bedroom. I was like Googling Adam's name, like trying to find him. And I was like, I've spoken to this boy before. Like I've seen his article before. Like I've read his story before. And my friends all thought I was crazy because I was like, I'm gonna message him. He's Somali. It's fine. And I had a mutual friend of ours actually be like, that's really weird. And I was like, no, like we're both Somali. It's not weird. And it was really weird to explain to them because they didn't understand that. But like I knew that another Somali getting a message from a fellow Somali saying, hi, by the way, I'm Somali, if you need anything let me know, wouldn't be weird. Like that Somali number wouldn't be weird.
Exactly.
But this white boy was looking at me like I was crazy. He was like, this is harassment. You can't just message him. And I was like, of course I can. Like, of course, like no one's gonna and you know, that's actually how we met. So like, yeah, how did the Somali community pursue you? And did you feel pressure actually from externally of the Somali community to have to like
a bit, I suppose, and I think it's in part why I sort of like haven't done very many front-facing things or whatever since, and have focused more so on like just sort of trying to keep my head down and do me in a way. I think the Somali community was like really proud because like with everyone, like if you see someone Somali doing well, you're proud of them. You want them to like succeed. It's like I feel like it's something that's like I want to say unique, but it's not unique. But the way in which like Somali people do it is to a whole new level. It's just like it's a Dakhan thing. It's like a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's different.
And I think they were like all really pleased about it. I had like a few funny calls with my cousins and stuff who were like, "Oh, well done," but like it's a bit annoying now because my mum's getting on to me about the fact that I've been playing Xbox all day. But I think everyone was really proud and like really pleased with how things had gone. So a moment that I really, really enjoyed was being able to like share in that with my mum and dad when I took them to the ISA Awards in 2017 when I was lucky enough to be nominated for the Educational Achievement Award. And my parents like sat down with me at the table, like literally right at the front next to the stage. Like my mum got dressed, my dad like slapped on his suit, and like they were just, there's this really cute photo of all of us from then as well. And just seeing like how proud they were, like literally my parents felt like celebrities. Like everybody was like coming up to them and they were like, "Oh, are you Mahoidi's Batai? Oh, mashallah." And the amount of Habarirs that were just swarming my mum. And like the car journey back when we were like going back home, and they were just telling me like, "We're really proud of you, like keep it up," and like and everything. That's something that meant a lot to me. And I think like obviously I'm like glad the wider Somali community and stuff is proud, but I think nothing's more precious than that particular moment where I sort of like saw my parents like eyes light up and all their hard work and all the sacrifices and stuff that they'd made for me, sort of seeing them be happy that it had started to come to fruition.
I was
It's
lucky enough
extra.
to actually meet Adam's parents as
Yeah.
well on his
Yeah.
move-in day, where they were also very proud. They were very lovely, like very sweet.
Yeah.
And just like on that actually, because obviously you did end up going to Oxford. That's how we met. And obviously, like one of the things about going to a school like that, which does do very well, is that everyone is expected to apply to these institutions, Oxford, Cambridge. And actually, I think it's weird if you don't apply. But obviously, you don't mind saying that you didn't
Of course,
necessarily
yeah.
get in the first time round.
Yeah.
Like, what
Wasn't
was
it necessarily about it? I didn't get in the first time around.
so, like,
Yeah.
do you want to tell us a bit about like maybe the pressure or not pressure to actually apply? How you found like the first series, what you learnt from it going into the second application period, and like any advice you would give to anyone applying?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously I'll like preface it with the fact that humanities is quite unique. If you're trying to apply for medicine, maybe don't listen to everything I'm saying here. I do study history, but I think a big part of like the application process for like many humanities subjects like English and history and stuff is being confident in yourself and having like a good sense of self, so much so that you know why you want to study what you want to study, but also what studying that looks like at the same time. I think like I applied initially and sort of like pushed myself into applying because I wanted to, like I said earlier on, it was like a long standing dream to like go to Oxford, and pushed myself into it, really wanted to do it, was like sort of pushed on by my teachers, went to like weekly Oxbridge classes, like basically every other boy in my year who were all applying at the time, who were applying at the time, like to Oxbridge. And I think part of it was that I just got so worked up in my head about the process and about like stats and about how many people get in and what college I should apply to and like what particular books I should list on my personal statement and whether or not I shouldn't apply here because I mentioned this book and that particular tutor who could interview me wrote a criticism of that, and it sort of, I got stuck down a bit of a rabbit hole, I think, which is why I think when it came to interviews, especially the history interview that I had when I applied the first time, I was just so nervous and like struggled to sort of properly get my words out and say what I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say it. So then I think a big part of it when it came to reapplying, there's a separate question of like why did I choose to reapply, but I'll talk about that after. But when it came to what changed and what was different, I think the fact that I was on my gap year, which there's a whole other stigma about whether or not, I remember really, really vividly when I told my grandma, who's really, really old now and lives with us, mashallah, when I told her I was going to take a year out of studying before going to university, she just gave me the weirdest look. And I saw her eyebrow just raise and she was like, "Madroga, get this up." Are you going off to sell drugs for a year or something? Why are you taking a year out of your studies, you idiot? Is what she said to me. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to teach debating in state schools across the country. I promise that's not a euphemism for like selling drugs across or anything like that. And she was like she wasn't sort of superly involved in my like academic stuff and whatever else because she just wasn't really involved in that side of things. It was mainly my mum and dad and me making decisions and talking to them about it. But when it came to sort of reapplying and being on my gap year, what changed I think between the first time and the second time is that I had the chance to kind of leave the bubble of Eton and leave like everybody around me wanting to apply and everybody around me all going for the same thing and there being a sort of bit of a culture of like sort of which I think is in some ways like quite healthy, like your peers wanting you to do well and everybody pushing each other for things that lots of people want, but leaving that I think gave me a bit of perspective but also helped me to kind of realize that there's a bigger world out there such that even if it doesn't work out it's not the end of the world. And I think that's the big question I asked myself. It hit me hard, like getting rejected the first time. Like with anything, if you want something and you don't get it, like you're not going to be happy, obviously, because if you're happy that you didn't get what you wanted, then you probably didn't want it in the first place. But I think, given the fact that I wanted it, and the question I asked myself then was, how would I feel if I got rejected like a second time? And I answered that to myself. The answer for me was not as bad as how I would feel maybe in like 20 years if I questioned what if I'd gone for it. And it was like the what if, and I'd rather just know kind of thing. And like obviously my life's changed for the better, I think, going to Oxford and being there now and making the most of all the opportunities there. So so I think that's that.
You know what I wanted to know about? You've mentioned like debating a couple times now, and I'm pretty sure Ikra mentioned debating too. Like, was that a hobby? When did you get into that? And
there's this amazing charity called Debate Mate that I got into debating through when I was in year 11. I remember I was like talking in the back of the classroom or whatever in history, and my history teacher obviously had to be history. My history teacher was like, instead of you going to detention, come back here, like at the end of the school day. If you don't come back, then you'll like get detention for 2 days in a row or something. Come back here and you'll like join the debating class or whatever. And it was like a Debate Mate debating class. Debate Mate's an educational charity that teaches debating, and like as a result of that, key 21st century skills in state schools across the country, and works with thousands, if not tens of thousands of students, not just in the UK, but also worldwide. And they ran a program at my secondary school back then. So I managed to start debating through that, and then spent some time on my gap year working for Debate Mate, in a way of kind of trying to give back for the same organisation that helped me a lot. Because I wasn't like in year 7, year 8, I was like a bit of a chatterbox, but when it came to like putting my hand up in class and stuff like that, I wasn't the most confident person with that. So it really helped me to find my confidence in that way. So I wanted to do the same for other people. And I was really lucky. I managed to teach debating in lots and lots of cities across the UK that I don't think I would have ever had any reason to go to, like Nottingham or Leeds. And managed to also go to countries like, I got to go to Rwanda and teach debating there for a month on my gap year, which is amazing because I'd never been to Africa before. And it was a great chance to have a look around parts of East Africa as well. But then also managed to go to Beijing and teach debating there, which is a whole other experience in and of itself, being in China. But that's a story for another day.
Another day.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I think what's really great about it is at the same time, was you someone like that was you did say obviously you was a chatterbox bottom, but at the same time was you a shy person? Would you say that you was quite quiet at the same time, like you didn't want all the attention on you? Was you someone like that? Because as time goes on, of course, everyone goes through growth. At the end of the day, like, was you someone who's a bit more quiet? You go to Eton, you came out your shell a bit more, and then when you go to Oxford, it's more like Adam's arrived kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I suppose, and like, yeah, in a way perhaps, but I think also like, I think this might not just be a thing for me that's like unique to me, but I think with lots of people, everybody always wants to think that their life's going in like a better direction in a way, or like going sort of more so the way that they want it. I'd love to like be this big confident character who has bigger arms than I currently do, and stuff like that. But I think that's the kind of progression, and that's the kind of path that I wanna be on. So I suppose I think like looking back, I think I've got more confident as time's gone on. I haven't stopped saying the words I think and but yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's a great thing. I think. I think that the first time I've seen you actually was the ITV interview firstly, and I was like, okay, this is great. Like, mashallah, he's gonna go into Eton now, and this is something great, because at the end of the day, we looked at something in terms of Somali when it comes to representation. We've got like a negative outlook on the media and everything else. So I thought this is great. This is, when it comes to representation, this is something that you put us in a positive light. Like this is great to have. So then I think as time went on, I was like, okay, you know, like you want to know, or what is he up to now, kind of thing, right? So I was like, okay, surely like I haven't seen his name come across. I didn't come across your name for quite some time after that. But actually, I did come across actually the ISA Awards, International Somali Awards. I think it was 2018, right? Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned to you before that because I think he was on a table on my left side, right? And I was like, oh, isn't that... Because you know, when you come to the awards, right, you see so many faces that are so familiar.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, isn't that person there? Isn't that person there? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, isn't that Adam?
Yeah.
Like, and because the thing is, once your meals are being served and they got a couple of things going on, you won't always have time to network. Oh, they actually had a pre-networking event, maybe, right, in a room.
I think I was probably
I
late.
think so. Yeah, there was
I'm not good at being on time for things.
yeah, so that makes sense why I didn't catch in that room. There's like a pre-network room, right, where everyone comes together and they talk and whatnot, kind of thing. And I was like, okay, this is quite good. And then I saw you across the table, whatnot, but you know, it gets busy and everything else. And I was like, okay, this looks quite good. And then I think I saw you went to Oxford and everything else. So is the question I wanted to say is that you being there, for example, is as a Somali person, did it weigh a lot on you being like having to represent us in a certain way, kind of thing? Does that mean that, okay, I've got to move in a certain way? Oh, if I do something wrong, the aunties might know, or whatever that might be, kind of thing.
Yeah. A funny story, something along those lines. It's like like growing up when I was at my secondary school back in like year 7, year 8 maybe. I always used to like go play football after school, and like most days with my friends. And there was this one particular football pitch in the like center of the council estate that my secondary school was basically on stroke next to, and I'd always come back like later than I would tell my dad I was going to come back, and I'd be like tired and I'd jump on the PlayStation and then I'd end up going to sleep or whatever, until my dad one day was like, you're not allowed to play football there anymore. Every single time you say you're coming back at this time, this, that and the other. So he basically banned me from like playing football at that particular place because it wasn't the safest place as well, I don't think. And then one day I was like to him, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the library after school, blah blah blah. And when you're younger, you think like, oh, you think you've got the jump on your parents, you think your brain box, you're thinking so many different ways. And I told him, oh, I'm gonna go to the library, and he's like, okay, cool, enjoy the library. and then one of my dad's friends just sees me, because it's like in South London on Old Kent Road, where there's so many Somali people, just sees me like going down the like alleyway towards the football pitch, and then he tells my dad, oh, I saw him, your son. And my dad was like, oh, where was he, what time was it? And tells my dad, I saw him, oh, going down there. He doesn't think anything of it when he's telling my dad this. And then I go home and my dad's like, how's the library? And I was like, it was good. And he was like, you know aderka wuu ku arkay. I don't know to this day whether or not he did see me, but
but it worked.
But it worked. And it's this idea, like the reason I bring up that story is like, it's this feeling of what you do is being watched, even if you don't know people are watching what you do.
Definitely.
And it's not about not doing certain things or being careful of certain stuff or whatever else because you're being watched, but just because it's the right thing to do in like lots of circumstances, I suppose. And I think part of it is like wanting to do good by yourself, like by your family and like by the people around you. So it's like, I don't know, there's a pressure that comes with it of like people. And I think what sort of like, not freaks me out, but like what, I don't know, it's hard to describe like the feeling of it, but the feeling of like people you don't know or somebody you might not know, like wishing so much good for you. And it's like, it's great and you like want to like take it in, but then it's also like, there's the distance between you and this, like this group of maybe 1,000 people who comment on one of the articles or whatever they see about you. I remember the other day I think it was maybe you, Ikra, who showed me this, like maybe a couple months ago. That same ITV interview was doing the rounds on TikTok, and it was getting like tens of thousands of views. And I was thinking, this was 5 years ago. And it really creeped me out.
Confession, I actually haven't seen the interview.
No. Okay.
I don't think it was me. I've never actually watched.
I think it was Shakila, who a friend of ours.
A friend of ours.
Oh, really? So he's making rounds on TikTok again?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And I thought this from 5 years ago. You can even see from the graphics. Like, it's just old graphics.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I obviously people want good news out there, especially when, unfortunately, there isn't that much great news out there about the Somali community. Like, especially when you see like how little news coverage the Somali boy who saved that old lady's life and died in the process, how little coverage he got,
definitely.
And how little like that barely got any airtime on the news. But then when an MP was murdered, which is obviously like incredibly sad as well, the fact that he was Somali was a headline. Whereas when when a Somali guy does something good, it's a man or an unnamed individual. So I think it's about like starting to change that narrative, which is why, as much as I might find it a bit creepy that video is making the rounds on TikTok, if it inspires somebody else to go on and to apply for some place like Eton or maybe even Oxford and whatever else, then
it must be difficult though, actually, because it's obviously you from a few years ago. It's obviously like the perception of, you know, like people will see it and have a certain perception of you. And even myself, like I read about you before I met you, and obviously I would have had my own perceptions about you. But I think that's one of the good things about going to university in of itself, is that, you know, you're learning, you're at a very like formative age, like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, like those are the ages where you're really learning about yourself. And one of the good things maybe about going to university sort of outside of London or outside of where there's a big Somali community is that actually one thing is people don't actually know, like outside, like a lot of people who, because when you go to university, you meet a lot of people, especially at a university like Oxford or Cambridge, you meet a lot of people that haven't been around a lot of ethnic minorities all their life. So they couldn't actually tell you what a Somali person it looks like. They couldn't tell you what, you know, and for a lot of people I met, I was the first Muslim that, me or the other girl in my year were the first Muslims that they'd ever met, or like, you know, or even like the first like black people they've ever properly spoken to. I had people, and I was shocked, like people would tell me this like a year into our friendship, they'd be like, yeah, like I actually don't know any other, you know, like people who are Muslim or like Muslim women specifically. So I think one thing is like, one of the difficulties is you very much write the narrative of what they now understand as like a Muslim woman or like, and actually you like, I think like as a woman, as like being Muslim and like obviously being black, like I think one thing I notice is like people project onto you like their own stereotypes. So like me and the other girl in my year who were Muslim, like I would say neither of us were particularly quiet and we were, you know, both very sociable, but I think there was like this perception around us that we were like quite quiet or submissive or like just, you know, like, I think people like I think people like projected what they thought a Muslim woman would be like onto us, if not that opposite. Like I had someone tell me before they met me they thought I'd be sassy, and I was like, what does that mean? Like I was like, excuse me. I mean, they weren't from England, so I'll let that slide, but like, I was like like I was not impressed. So it's like that kind of thing where like I think that's one of the difficulties, but actually because there aren't that many Somali people and actually because like often like it's a small community, and even like the black community is a small community, I think there's a very little judgment and there's a lot of like support because you're all in quite a difficult situation together. And I think that's one of the great things about maybe like going to uni where there isn't a lot of you, is that you actually very quickly become very well acquainted and like the pressures.
But then again, but then again, this goes out to you, and this can go out to you too. Since you went to Oxford, you being Somali, for example, did you embrace that? Because some people, depending on the situation or wherever they are, they might not embrace that. They're like, you know what, I don't want to even speak about that, or you know, I don't want people to feel like I'm from there. They can guess anything else, but as long as I don't bring it up, they won't know where I'm from because of the particular stereotypes that I'm attached to it.
I don't think either of us have that. Straight away we were talking Somali in front of people that couldn't understand it, just to annoy them. Like I think for us, I think it's fair to say that like neither of us particularly. But having said that, it's also not like it's not a badge that we wear. Like, you know, like for those people, it's very visible that you're black, or it's very visible that you're Muslim, but it's not necessarily visible that you're Somali. And like where it comes up, it will be a big, you know, a big thing. Like obviously amongst like ACS and stuff, they'll know, like they know what a Somali person looks like compared to
ACS being the African Caribbean Society.
Caribbean Society. So amongst black people, they'll know that you're Somali, obviously. But like I don't think either of us, I think it was because of the fact that it was the reason why we reached out to each other. It's the reason why I knew Adam was because he was Somali. I don't think it was ever a thing for us where it was like, oh, like let's be like a bit conscious about it. And if anything, I think sort of the white people we were surrounded by were mostly quite nice and inquisitive. Like they want to know about your culture and your food. They want to eat all your food. Like, they want to know the words. Like, you know, like it's very like most of the people you meet are like excited to embrace that, I think, and like that. So I don't think we ever felt speaking for you.
No, I agree. I agree with
any
you.
Pressure to like hide the fact.
No, I 100% agree with you. Like, and I think literally what you touched on, Nikra, is I think spot on. Like the idea, or like being Somali is just such a unique thing as well, because it's an intersection of so many different identities, like being Muslim, being black, like looking like you're black, and like being seen to be Muslim if you're like wearing a headscarf and stuff as well. So like it's just a really unique like intersection of so many different identities that it itself is like kind of it's difficult to place it like within that, but also not anything that either of us were ever ashamed of, like being unapologetically so.
Because it just did there are 2 other Somali girls like across the university in my year, and I met them both like just like offhandedly on the street, and based purely on the fact that they were Somali and they could see I was Somali, we spoke to each other, like and it was like purely just off of that. And I think not many other people have the uniqueness of that experience. I mean, like there are like, I have a Japanese friend at uni who also is like very heavily involved in like Japanese society and would do a very similar thing, but like I've never seen it to the extent of Somali people. Like I've never
OCT
seen
with it.
The only thing I can think of is like, you know, obviously when you're, you know, the black person sees a black person.
Or like Muslim girl to Muslim girl will do it as well. Like when you're the only 2 Muslim women in a room, will gravitate towards each other.
But then again, in some corporate spaces where literally you come across another black person, like you get that kind of vibe of, yes, we're both black, but that doesn't mean anything. Like, don't come kind of near me. Do you know what I mean?
So
like,
get out film type
exactly.
vibes,
It's literally that. So whereas if you and I know, this would definitely be it. But if you see another Somali in a corporate space, or whatever else that might be, there's like this unspoken rule where, you know, literally the Somali would just be so hard where it overrides anything kind of thing. So it comes to a point where, it doesn't matter. How can I help you? Like, what do you
also because we're so distinctive looking. Like, it's so clear
but
when
you
someone...
But then again, it's like Adam said. I think it was Adam that said, like, you want to see each other win.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. Like, you wish the best for each other. So that's exactly where it comes across. So if I see another person like a Somalian, whether the workspace, whatever that might be, it's like, how can I help you? Like, what can I do for you? Rather than, how can you benefit me kind of thing. And I think that's what made it easy for you to for you to kind of reach out to him kind of thing, because you could have easily said, you know what, oh, this is the kid that went to Eton, for example, he's going to be a bit maybe snobby, whatever, let me not do that. But you said, no, he's Somali, I'm Somali, that's going to override everything, forget about it, do you know what I mean, kind of thing.
I did vet him first.
All right, fair enough.
Let's not get crazy. No, joking. No. But yeah, no, I think it is like the Somali aspect. And you'll find even at uni, like even people that aren't necessarily like traditionally what you would expect of like Somali people, or like what like in London like have the same, even they, like when they meet you, like it's like no matter what experience they've had as a Somali person, whatever, the fact that you're Somali, it comes up within 2 seconds, and they're very much like wanting to speak to you because of that very reason. And like, and I found it surprising that even like those people that I would have thought stereotypically weren't very like the Somali people I know at home, even they cling on to it, like really cling on to it as an identity. And I think that's like really nice. Like it's really sad to think that there are people who have to like hide that part of themselves or like hide something in order to fit in. Like I don't even think it's something to be like angry about. It's like, I'm sorry that you've had to have you've clearly had experiences in your life that have made you have to hide certain things, which is like very sad. But I think that's one lucky thing where like, I think at
it's probably quite rare, I'd say, when it comes to Somali's anyways, because we're quite loud. And I think the best way to put it is if we just put ourselves out of it kind of thing, saying, okay, like if someone was to look in and say, what are Somalis like when they're together? We're quite a loud bunch. Like we're really
probably
like,
hear
literally. So exactly, that's exactly how we are. Literally, we're loud as it is, and you know, but I think at the same time, that's a good thing, because we're quite confident when it comes to it. Like, we're not really, we don't really need to question ourselves. Kind of, we're really confident within ourselves, and I think that's a really, that's a good thing to have.
And it's one of the things that people at uni should definitely look to like seek out, like some like Somali groups and societies and things like that,
that's
because it definitely provides a different kind of support network, especially if you've gone to university outside of London. Like I think I think it's quite a different experience, because in London there are a lot, like I have a lot of friends at London universities, there's loads of Somali people, so it isn't like you don't have to necessarily go looking. There's only these societies are massive and established, but outside of London, like I think it provides a really good support system and network for people, and not just in terms of like the experience, in terms of moving forward, like your future, like things like careers and stuff like that. People are very, very willing and wanting to sort of help out, which is nice. And like it's always nice to have that kind of solidarity, like moving forward, you know, outside of uni, and the people you meet, like the Somali people I met at uni are still very much some of my closest friends. So it's always a nice thing to hold on to.
I think when you done the interview, for example, it was 2016, around that time, right? Yeah. So the Somalis around status, whatever we were at that time, 2016, is a lot different to 2021. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things have changed, right? So I think even 2016, 2015, I honestly didn't think there was even that many Somali. There was a big Somali community even in Brixton or South itself, other than maybe Wandsworth or whatever, around that, Southwest and that. So what's it like? For example, you're a young Somali boy, still from Brixton, kind of thing. If you still, of course, you must be proud of that at the same time, kind of community wise. And do a lot of Somalis reference you, kind of thing, the local community, for example? Do they try to reach out to your family and say, okay, my kid's really bright, can Adam maybe, you know, help them out with some things and whatnot?
Like I think in the age of like social media as well, just the word community has like an entirely different meaning in some ways.
I think so, yeah.
And I've like had people like reach out to me randomly on like Facebook or Instagram or whatever else, and I've always like, if some, especially like Somali people, and send me message requests like asking for help on a particular personal statement because they're applying for this particular university and they think I could help, and I'm always keen to help, like whenever I can, if I'm able to and if I've got the time. And I think that's what, at least in my head, like the idea of community is quite a different thing. And like we've got neighbours and stuff who are Somali, like a few doors down, who we're really close with, and I'm always happy to help and stuff. So
that's actually really good, yeah.
So who's like I know you mentioned the teacher earlier, like, but who's helped you like throughout your journey? Like, do you have any mentors or anybody that you go to like for any kind of like navigating?
I think first and foremost, like my parents, they always give really good advice, and I'm like really grateful for everything that they've done for me. I do have a few mentors, like people who have done like cool things from like law to like politics and stuff, who I ask advice of, and especially if I'm like facing a difficult decision about something, or I'm not sure whether or not to apply for something. And I think like part of it is like sometimes when like everybody sometimes like suffers from like low self-esteem in certain circumstances, or not backing themselves as much as they should back themselves, and sometimes backing yourself too much. But I think like it's always useful to have people around you who ground you, but also like encourage you to take a leap and to do the things that you know you can do and you want to, probably deep down, but you just need somebody to kind of push you. And I think I've always found it really useful, like hearing how other people see certain situations, or like see like decisions that I've made and what decisions I have open to me. And it goes back to like, I think in part me being inquisitive, but also curious, but also like wanting to learn myself and do better and be better. Which is why, I think like mentorship is something that's really, really important. And also, as like a last thing on that, it's this idea of like paying it, like for them, at least for like mentors, it's like paying it back, because lots of people who are mentors and like give advice to people, have had people who have done similar things for them. And I think with mentorship, the thing is that like, even if you don't know it, everyone's probably a mentor to somebody else in one way or another, whether or not it's your younger brother asking you whether or not they like should go tamales and like get chicken and chips, even though there's a whole Dixie full of buddies.
But it's that's
Like,
the
that-
tough decision.
yeah. and it's decisions like that, however big they might seem to different people, that I think are quite important and help shape people. So I think everybody's mentoring somebody at some point, or multiple people. As cheesy or cringy as that sounds, but
No, I think that's quite important, definitely.
Yeah, I think, and also I think it's a big sentiment across, like, you'll meet a lot of people, a lot of students as well, especially like across that sort of at the you know, sort of certain universities and stuff like that, who find it's a really big part of, like, actually, like, of the fact that they got in. It's like a really big part of it is giving back, because someone took the time to teach you and to help you and to make you understand quite complicated application processes and give you advice. And so I think a big part of, like, everyone I knew who was sort of ethnic minority or from a poor background at Oxford was very much involved in making it accessible for more people, which I think is also always like a big, like a really nice thing. And that is one thing, if anyone is thinking about applying or has questions, like even messaging any of the Somali Society, like pages on all the social media, or even like individually reaching out to people who do a subject, like no one will ever say no, or like if they did, and it would only ever be out of time commitments, and they would direct you elsewhere to get the resources. And I think that's part of that, is what sort of Adam said, is that someone did it for you, so you feel like you have to then do it for someone else.
It's about not pulling up the ladder.
Yeah. It's also almost a cycle, actually. Like you see it when you're at uni and stuff. It's like first year, second year, people are really, really excited to get involved in things like that. And then by third year, you've got exams, you're tired, but the next lot have come up, and the ones you helped get in are there now. I think like we can both give examples of people we've helped out, like with applications, and they've ended up like at uni, and it's like it's such a nice feeling to know that, like, you know, that they're there partly because of your help, like obviously not completely, like, but like as in partly like because of help you gave them, which is always a very nice feeling. But just on that, so obviously, you know, one of the things why I like wanted you particularly on the podcast, and one of the things why I think you're really impressive, is because of part of your curious nature. Is that you've done loads of really cool things, and part of that is like being president of the Oxford Union, which for those people that don't know, like Adam can obviously explain much better, but like it's like it's not, I don't know if it is actually I don't think it is connected to the uni as per se, but it's where it's like it's sort of like a society or a chamber that you can join, but they have lots of incredible speakers that come year on year, term on term, and there are incredible debates on there, and you know, it's worth checking out, like your Oxford Union on YouTube and stuff, because it's, you know, like literally everyone you can think of, any celebrity you can think of, actor to politician, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, all the way to like presidents of
I think a footballer even came there. Van Nistelrooy done it one time.
Loads of
Van Nistelrooy. I didn't even know footballers come and do that. Because I thought it was just things like Mehdi Hassan, for example, like when he done head to head there, for example, a couple of times. I thought, okay, maybe it's just to do maybe politics or anything else, because someone like us, for example, that don't really tune into these kind of things, right? And we're just on the outside kind of thing. But when we type in a name, for example, the Oxford, literally it just pops up to us kind of thing. So it was like, and I saw Van Nistelrooy there. I'm thinking, what is he doing? And it's
like,
not
Alex Ferguson also.
I think Alex Ferguson done it there too.
I think his name was Petr Cech.
Petr Cech done it too there,
and like lots of really, really interesting like football personalities.
And even in the sort of uni, like it's very much like a position of
big
like
thing,
prestige, purely just because of the access you have to, you know, people want the access to these big celebrities that are coming. You know, you want to get a meet and greet with us, you want to make buddy, but even within like the university, it's a really like prestigious, you know, like position. You know, Adam will talk about some of the responsibilities, but you do have to take a year out in order to even fulfill the position.
That's crazy,
and so it's a very difficult like position to hold. It's a lot of power, it's a lot of responsibility, but also it's produced, you know, some of the like several of these country's prime ministers have been before they were prime ministers were, you know, presidents of the Oxford Union, or at least involved in the Oxford Union in some way. Not saying we have our feet, but I am saying,
forbid,
you know, like the opportunities and what people learn from that position is almost so unique that I thought it'd be really cool to have Adam sort of talk about that.
Yeah.
And
So in terms of you got it spot on in terms of like background to what it is. In terms of like whether or not it's connected to the university. So a bit of background on the Oxford Union. It was founded almost 200 years ago in the 1820s, and it started off basically at that time in Oxford. A lot of what people studied was like about religion and about theology. So like basically Christianity in some ways, but also like Latin, Greek, and subjects like that. And the university itself restricted debate and conversation on certain topics around like religious freedoms because they didn't want people questioning certain things. And there were a group of students who were fed up with that. So what they did is they created the Oxford Union Society, which is basically a society where they could discuss things that they weren't allowed to discuss in their classrooms or with their professors or with their teachers and tutors, or people in their colleges across the university. So that's kind of what it started off as, like a place for freedom of speech, for difficult topics to be discussed with nuance, but also with respect to one another and stuff like that. And as the years have gone by, it's evolved into one of the world's most prestigious debating societies, holds regular Thursday night debates throughout term time, and has hosted figures from the Dalai Lama to Mother Teresa to Malcolm X to US presidents, as Ikra said, to Alex Ferguson and top football managers and footballers and Michael Jackson. You probably can't say Michael Jackson anymore, actually. But
Well, that's been there.
Moving swiftly on. All right. And lots of really interesting people. And its past presidents have included people like Boris Johnson, the current Prime Minister, and who else? And a few other like interesting people. And yeah, it was a great opportunity to be able to be part of that space. Big commitment. Like you say, I had to take a year out. But I was really fortunate because during my term, I got to get speakers from Jeremy Corbyn to Dick and Dom, which lots of people recognise from their childhood. Yeah, from Dick and Dom in the bungalow. And yeah, it was just really magical being able to be the one interviewing those people, and the amount of pressure on you when you have a kind of packed debating chamber with like hundreds of people all watching you, waiting to laugh if you slip up as you're asking one of the questions, or in their head, probably, as I would probably do if I was sat in their seat, criticising why I asked that particular question that way. And I'd spend ages before thinking about how to word each question and like not to go on for too long because they're not here to listen to me, they're here to listen to the speaker and everything else. So which is why I think it's quite interesting, like stroke fun, me now being on the opposite side of the interview table now. But it was honestly like a great opportunity and really life-changing, especially being able to do it as somebody who is black, who is Somali, being the first Somali to be an officer of the Oxford Union, let alone president, and to be, I think, probably the third or fourth black president, the last one being Sam Jima in the 90s. So the first black president of this millennium.
The last person was in the 90s?
The last black person, yeah.
Which, another thing which is crazy, when they set up about 200 years ago, they'll never foresee like a Somali, for example, taking over. I think at that time probably they were prepping themselves to probably come over to our shores probably to get a crack at them. But you know what I mean? And then they're saying literally, oh, wow, Somali. But and again, this is a great achievement for someone like me and Ivan, who of course didn't attend Oxford, for us to know that you've taken a position at the Oxford Union, which is a great feat. And yeah, no, honestly,
it's a really big deal, isn't it? Like I think we're just glossing over it a little bit.
I'm saying like things like head to head just for people to relate to it, but this is a real big thing. Like you said, you took a year out, and this is a major commitment. Yeah. So when you have so many different speakers that come on, right, you've got to do so much preparations for it, and we wouldn't even imagine what kind of how much preparations goes into it.
It's literally because a lot of it is so like focused on the next term. So even though you have to take a year out, there are 3 terms in the academic year. you technically are only it for 2 terms. So you're only president for 1 term, and the term before that you're president-elect. When you're president-elect, you spend that time trying to prepare for your term, but it's difficult because the then president is trying to make sure their term runs smoothly and they have everything.
Yeah.
So then you have the holiday just before your term begins to get together what people call your term card, which is basically just all the events that you're going to have, the calendar of all the events.
Yeah.
And there's always so much pressure to like get headline names agreeing to come, and you give them like a month, 2 months, 3 months notice if you're lucky, trying to get them to confirm, trying to get them to agree to come, and then create this. In the end, mine was just over 100-page booklet with all of the events, all the panels. I think we had something like 8 panels, each with about 4 or 5 speakers, ranging from topics from testing myself now, from like climate change to cryptocurrency and to lots of topics around that, and like had 10 debates in the end, which was more than any other term, and organising social events as well, from like karaoke nights to whatever else, to try and get people in and around the buildings such that they get involved in the space and they come to the debating workshops as well, and trying to push the debating workshops. And then I had something like 50 or 60 individual speakers come like throughout the term. And it's full on and it's tiring because you go from, one day I had like 3 interviews, I think maybe all on the same day. One of them was like a pre-recorded one. And like you go from doing like a 1 hour interview with somebody, you have literally like a 30-minute break. You then jump straight into the next one, and then you have to get dressed like properly, not just like top half, and put on a full proper suit with a tie and everything, and then do one in front of people, and it's physically exhausting. Needing to smile, semi-smile for like an hour straight, even though what the people are saying is really interesting and really enjoyable, but it really does drain you. But I think looking back at it, I'm really grateful and really happy that I had the opportunity to do that, because it opens you up to so many different people as well, because like we were talking about earlier on, going into things with an open mind, never knowing what could happen, but being willing to take things as they come. I think it is.
I think one of the biggest things I didn't appreciate before, because obviously I knew of the union I was member, but was not at all involved in any of the politics of it all. I think the one thing I didn't realise until I had to see Adam doing it was like, it's like a proper job, and you're responsible for an entire, because you're also responsible, there are like staff employed to these places, you know, like there are staff that help run everything, and there's a whole network, and you are like the student representative, but also like you have an actual job, like you have actual responsibilities and people to oversee. You are like a manager, and it's bonkers, like it's crazy. And also not even just that, like outside of it, to even get elected, you know, the level of time commitment you have to put in is ridiculous. Like you have to be there during holidays, willing to work with very little compensation for your if any, for like your board and like you're eating it, like what you eat and stuff. So it's like, I think I didn't appreciate, I think that's one thing people don't appreciate, is, you know, you see the end result, and if I hadn't known like Adam personally, I wouldn't have known any of the level of work, because they do make it look quite smooth. But like there is essentially an event on almost like every day, if not every other day, whether that's social or not, and often the president of the union has to be there at all of these events, and like manage a lot of students, a lot of internal politics, you know, and it is really, really impressive that you were able to do it. He was looking tired by the end, I have to say. I know. I was feeling bad by the end, but it's really cool. And like, what would you say for you was like the highlight experience of the whole thing?
That's a really good question. There was just like lots of different highlights. I think like when it comes to speaker events, one of the like there were a few like speaker events that, like 3 in particular, that really stood out to me. I'll tell you about them. I had like a lot of other highlights as well, from like the amount of people who joined whilst I was president, the amount of engagement we had with societies across the university who before didn't want anything to do with us whatsoever. And like in any previous term, if one society collaborated with the union, we'd be kind of lucky. And in my term, I was really lucky. We had 15, 16 different societies who collaborated with us on different panel events and different projects that we ran, from the chess club, when we managed to get the world #1 chess player called Magnus Carlsen to talk.
Very popular event.
And it was a really
At
popular
Oxford
event.
University, everyone loves chess.
Yeah.
So it's a very popular event.
Which is a bit embarrassing because I can barely play chess myself. But he didn't know himself that I
Which is
couldn't
good.
really play chess.
Unless they bring out the board for you and
No,
ask you
yeah.
to play.
It would have been
Which
it all.
is- yeah.
And yeah, before then I was like practicing like how to pronounce like all of the names of like other chess players that were in the questions and stuff that I was like preparing to make sure I didn't fall flat on my face. And but the 3 speaker events in particular that really stood out as like highlights. I'll like go in order of like the order in which they happened. The first was Dr. Bernard Lafayette Jr., who is an African American civil rights activist, but also really big, still currently in activism in America, and does lots of other things as well. And I think is a doctor at Stanford too. He's incredibly interesting. He was on lots of the people watching might have seen the film Selma. He was one of the people who marched arm in arm with Martin Luther King Jr., was best buds with him, and worked really, really closely with him on a lot of like civil rights activism in the 60s and 50s and before in America. So he was incredibly interesting, and like towards the end of the interview, his wife just like pops her head on the Zoom, because it was on this particular interview, it was on Zoom. And pops her head, and like he just stops in mid answer, and this really, really sweet old guy like says, "Oh, and this is my wife," and then she waves at the camera and she's like, "Oh, lovely to meet you, Adam," and it's just like waving really smiley, and just the stories that he'd had of everything that he'd accomplished, the warmth that I got from him even on Zoom, it was just quite
Very
breathtaking.
genuine, probably, yeah, which is great.
The second one was a woman called Eva Schloss, who is a survivor of Auschwitz, and she gave this really, really like really emotional and like kind of deeply upsetting. It was an in-person event, and there were hundreds of people in the debating chamber there to listen to her about what life was like in the concentration camps during Nazi Germany, and her experience then, and everything that she's done since then, and the books that she's written. And like before, I thought it might have been a Q&A, and I'd prepared some questions in case, but I hadn't like had that clear an indication of what exactly she was gonna say. And we set it up such that it was me sat alongside her in a like typical interview sort of setup, and she was like, "No, I'm just happy to talk for an hour and like give her testimony." And it was just really difficult being sat up there hearing all of these stories and not like physically being like looking visibly like so visibly upset about it. And I think that's something that I found quite eye-opening. And the third was being able to interview Jeremy Corbyn as well, to another like really packed audience, and speak to him about lots of different issues, and all the work that he's done in politics. I think that was really interesting. So yeah, there were lots of highlights, but I think like above all else, it was just the experience and how much more well-rounded. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but
No, it's fine. So what would you say was your key sort of takeaway from that whole experience? Like, what's like the biggest lesson you'd say you learned?
that's a really good question. Do you want to come back to me? Actually, you know what? What I would say is that one of the key takeaways from it is being able to, like, I don't know, one of the things that became really important to me off the back of it is being confident in yourself, but not overly confident, and seeing that fine line, but also at the same time not letting things go to your head if like something works out, but at the same time on the flip side, not letting things get you too far down if something doesn't work out, and thinking that, I don't know, in a nutshell, I think my key takeaway is just because one door closes or opens doesn't necessarily mean that other doors won't open.
No, yeah, that's,
So
and just to say, like, one, like, because, you know, for Adam in this position, I think one thing that won't be highlighted as much is like that, you know, the union was itself getting quite a lot of attention before, not necessarily for positive reasons, particularly to do with like a couple of like racist incidents. And actually, like, you know, I think this is one of the things that happens behind the scenes, is that like Adam was able to do so much for like helping internally in terms of like the structures in place to sort of stop that kind of behaviour. And like I would personally say it did have an impact, because even now, you know, like one of the sort of future to be elected presidents is another like black man. So it's like, you know, like perceptions are changing of the place, and it's becoming a more inclusive space, which is really nice. So like one thing I want to know as your friend is like, what for you is like, what do you think is next? Do you know? Like, no pressure if you don't know, but like, what do you want to do?
I mean, what's immediately next is finish my degree, hopefully.
Get through final year. Good luck.
Yeah, do well in it, fingers crossed. I think probably what I want to do, there's lots of different things that I want to do throughout my life, but hopefully maybe straight after my degree, hopefully do a master's in like African studies in particular, go into some kind of academia, study Somali history in particular. And because I think history is something that's really important. The way stories are told, the way narratives are told still has an impact today on lots of different people's day-to-day lives. So I think that's something that I want to get involved in terms of beginning to change the narrative, something that we've touched on throughout this.
Thank you so much for that, Adam.
Thank you.
For your help today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, man. Hopefully, like, this episode here will, you know, like, inspire, you know, like, young Somalis and just young people in general to, you know, like, try and aim to go in for, you know, like, to establishments like Eton and Oxford University, because obviously you're the second, you know, Oxford student, and you're gonna graduate soon to be on the podcast. That's 2 Somalis. That is something to really celebrate.
That already say something. No, definitely that you highlighted that. But at the same time, it's like having someone like Adam on, which is, you know, really thankful again for literally for coming on this pod today, because at the same time, not long ago, 3 months ago, I think you had Jeremy Corbyn literally that on the other side. So having yourself on it just, once again, it just shows that you know, the positive aspect of Somalis, like it's not, of course, not echoed as much as the negative publications that's probably out there, but at the same time, it just shows that like you said, the narratives are changing,
100%.
Inshallah. So bit by bit that we all got a part to play in that. So no, thanks. And again, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate that. Thank you, man.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
And so where can people find like the videos of like you and Jeremy Corbyn and that?
So if you want to see any of the interviews that I've done with the Oxford Union, you can go on to the Oxford Union's website, YouTube channel, and all of the videos should be on there.
Can I tag the videos like underneath this?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Quite good.
Well worth watching.
Yeah.
Well worth. Yeah. No,
Like, comment, and subscribe.
like, comment, subscribe.
Leave positive comments.
positive comments.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So, yeah.
No,
man.
once again, thanks for having on.
Thank
Cheers.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks.